Welcome to Fairy Tale Theater. Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, in a land far away, on the very edge of a large, dark forest, lived a poor woodcutter, his wife, and 2 children. The boy was named Hansel and the girl Gretel. The family had always had very little to live on, and once, when there was a great famine in the land, he couldn't even provide them with their daily bread. One night, as he was tossing about in bed, full of cares and worry, he sighed and said to his wife, "What's to become of us? How are we to support our poor children now that we have nothing more for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman, who happened to be the children's stepmother. "Early tomorrow morning, we'll take the children out into the thickest, darkest part of the wood. There we shall light a fire for them and give them each a piece of bread. Then we'll go on to our work and leave them alone. They won't be able to find their way home, and we shall thus be rid of them." "No, wife," said her husband. "That I won't do. How could I find it in my heart to leave my children alone in the wood? The wild beasts would soon come and tear them to pieces." "Oh, you fool!" she said. "Then we must all die of hunger. You may just as well go and plane the boards for our coffins." And she left him no peace until he gave in. "But I can't help feeling so sorry for the poor children," added her husband. The children, too, had not been able to sleep because they were so hungry, and they'd heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitterly and spoke to Hansel. "Well, now it's all up to us." No, Gretel," said Hansel. "Don't worry yourself. I'll be able to find a way to escape. Don't be scared." And when their parents had fallen asleep, he got up, slipped on his little coat, opened the back door, and snuck outside. The moon was shining clearly, and the white pebbles which lay in front of the house glittered like bits of silver. Hansel bent down and filled his pocket with as many of them as he could cram in. Then he went back and said to Gretel, "Be comforted, my dear sister, and go to sleep. God will not desert us." And he lay down in bed again. At daybreak, even before the sun was up, the woman came and woke the 2 children. "Get up, you sleepy heads! We're all going to the forest to fetch wood." She gave them each a bit of bread and said, "There's something for your luncheon, but don't eat it up before, for it's all you're going to get." Gretel took the bread under her apron, as Hansel had the stones in his pocket. Then they all set out together on the way to the forest. After they'd walked for a little, Hansel stood still and looked back at the house. And this maneuver he repeated again and again. His father observed him and said, "Hansel, what are you gazing at out there? Why are you always falling behind? Watch where you're walking or you'll slip and fall." "Oh, father," said Hansel, "I'm looking back at my white kitten, which is sitting on the roof, waving me farewell." The woman exclaimed, "What a fool you are! That isn't your kitten. That's the morning sun shining on the chimney." But Hansel was not looking back at his kitten. Every time he would look back, he would drop one of the white pebbles out from his pocket onto the path. When they had reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Now, children, go and fetch a lot of wood, and I'll light a fire so that you won't be so cold." Hansel and Gretel heaped up brushwood till they had made a pile nearly the size of a small hill. The brushwood was set on fire, and when the flames leapt high, the woman said, "Now lie down at the fire, children, and rest yourselves. We're going into the forest to cut down wood. When we've finished, we'll come back and fetch you." Hansel and Gretel sat down beside the fire, and at midday they ate their little bits of bread. They heard the strokes of the axe, so they thought their father was quite near. But it was no axe they heard, but a bow he had tied on a dead tree, and that was blown about by the wind. And when they'd sat for a long time, their eyes closed with fatigue, and they fell fast asleep. When they awoke at last, it was pitch dark. Gretel began to cry and said, "How are we ever to get out of the woods?" But Hansel comforted her. "Wait a bit," he said, "till the moon is up, and then we'll find our way sure enough." And when the moon had risen, he took his sister by the hand and followed the pebbles, which shone like new threepence bits, and showed them the path. They walked on through the night, and at daybreak they reached their father's house again. They knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it, she exclaimed, "You naughty children, what a time you've slept in the wood! We thought you were never going to come back." But their father rejoiced, for his conscience had reproved him so for leaving his children behind by themselves. Not long afterward, there was again a great famine in the land, and the children heard their mother address their father thus in bed one night. "Everything is eaten up once more. We have only 1/2 of a loaf of bread in the house, and when that's gone, well, it's all over for us. The children must be gotten rid of. We'll lead them deeper into the wood this time, so that they won't be able to find their way out again. There is no other way of saving ourselves." The man's heart hurt him heavily, and he thought, surely it would be better to share his last bite with his own children. But his wife wouldn't listen to his arguments, and did nothing but scold and reproach him. If a man yields once, he's done for, and so, because he had given in the first time, he was forced to do so the second. But the children were awake, and they heard the conversation. When the old people were asleep, Hansel got up and wanted to go out and pick up pebbles again, as he had done the first time. But the woman had barred the door, and Hansel could not get out. But he consoled his little sister and said, "Don't cry, Gretel, and sleep peacefully, for God is sure to help us." At early dawn, the woman came and made the children get up. They received their bit of bread, but it was even smaller than the time before. On the way to the wood, Hansel crumbled it in his pocket, and every few minutes he stood still and dropped a crumb on the ground. "Hansel, what are you stopping and looking about for?" said his father. "I'm looking back at my little pigeon, which is sitting on the roof, waving me farewell," answered Hansel. "You foolish child," said the wife. "That isn't your pigeon. It's the morning sun glittering on the chimney." Hansel gradually threw all his crumbs on the path. The woman led the children still deeper into the forest, farther than they had ever been in their lives before. Then a big fire was lit again, and the mother said, "Just lie down here, children, and if you're tired, you can sleep for a bit. We're going into the forest to cut wood, and in the evening when we're finished, we'll come back to fetch you." At midday, Gretel divided her bread with Hansel, for he had strewn all his along the path. Then they fell asleep, and evening passed away, but nobody came for the poor children. They didn't awaken until it was pitch dark, and Hansel comforted his sister, saying, "Only wait, Gretel, till the moon rises. Then we shall see the breadcrumbs I scattered along the path, and they will show us the way back to the house." When the moon appeared, they got up, but they found no crumbs, for the thousands of birds that fly about the woods and fields had picked them all up. "Never mind," said Hansel to Gretel. "You'll see, we'll find a way out." But they did not. They wandered about the whole night, and the next day from morning till evening, but they could not find a path out of the wood. They were very hungry, too, for they had nothing to eat but a few berries they found growing on the ground. And at last they were so tired that their legs refused to carry them any longer. So they lay down under a tree and fell fast asleep. On the third morning, after they had left their father's house, they set about their wandering again, but only got deeper and deeper into the wood, and now they felt that if help did not come, they soon must perish. At midday they saw a beautiful little snow-white bird sitting on a branch, which sang so sweetly that they stopped still to listen to it. And when its song was finished, it flapped its wings and flew on in front of them. They followed it and came to a little house, on the roof of which it perched. And when they came quite near, they saw that the cottage was made of bread and roofed with cakes, while the window was made of transparent sugar. "Now we'll get to it," said Hansel, "and have a regular blowout. I'll eat a bit of the roof, and you, Gretel, can eat some of the window, which you will find very sweet, I'm sure." Hansel stretched up his hand and broke off a bit of the roof to see what it was like, and Gretel went to the window and began to nibble at it. Thereupon a shrill voice called out from inside,
"Nibble, nibble, little mouse, who's nibbling at my house?"
The children answered, "'Tis heaven's own child, the tempest wild," and went right on eating without even moving an inch. Hansel, who thoroughly appreciated the roof, tore down a big bit of it, while Gretel pushed out a whole round window pane and sat down the better to enjoy it. Suddenly the door opened, and an ancient-looking old lady, leaning on a staff, hobbled out. Hansel and Gretel were so terrified that they froze, and let what they were holding in their hands just fall to the ground. But the old woman shook her head and said, "Oh, you dear children, who led you here? Just come in and stay with me. No ill shall befall you. You'll be fine." She took them both by the hand and led them into the house. And inside, what did they find but the most sumptuous dinner they had ever seen laid before them? Milk and sugared pancakes, apples and nuts. After they had finished, 2 beautiful little white beds were prepared for them, and when Hansel and Gretel lay down, they felt as if they were in heaven. The old woman had appeared to be most friendly, but she was really an old witch who had waylaid the children, and had only built the little house in order to lure them in. When anyone came into her power, she killed, cooked, and ate them, and she held a regular feast day for the occasion. Now, witches have red eyes and cannot see far, but like beasts, they have a keen sense of smell, and know when human beings pass by. When Hansel and Gretel fell into her hands, she laughed maliciously and said jeeringly, "I've got them now, they shall not escape." Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she rose up, and when she saw them both sleeping so peacefully, with their rosy round cheeks, she muttered to herself, "That'll be a dainty bite." Then she seized Hansel with her bony hand and carried him into a little stable. She barred the door. He might scream as much as he liked, but it did him no good. Then she went to Gretel, shook her until she awoke, and cried, "Get up, you lazy bones! Fetch water and cook something for your brother. When he's fat, I'll eat him up." Gretel began to cry bitterly, but it was of no use. She had to do what the wicked witch bade her. So the best food was cooked for poor Hansel, but Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning the old woman hobbled out to the stable and cried, "Hansel, put out your finger that I might feel if you're getting fat." But Hansel always stretched out a bone, and the old dame, whose eyes were dim, couldn't see it, and thinking always it was Hansel's finger, wondered why he fattened so slowly. When 4 weeks had passed, and Hansel still remained thin, she lost patience, and determined to wait no longer. "Well, Gretel," she called to the girl, "be quick and get some water. Hansel may be fat or thin, but I'm going to kill him tomorrow and eat him." Oh, how the little sister sobbed as she carried the water, and how the tears rolled down her cheeks. "Kind heaven help us now," she cried. "If only the wild beasts of the wood had eaten us, then at least we should have died together." "Just hold your peace," said the old hag. "It won't help you." Early in the morning, Gretel had to go out and hang up the kettle full of water and light the fire. "First we'll bake," said the old lady. "I've heated the oven already and kneaded the dough." She pushed Gretel out to the oven, from which fiery flames were already issuing. "Crawl in," said the witch, "and see if it's properly heated, so that we can shove in the bread and get your brother in there, too." For when she had got Gretel in, she meant to close the oven and bake the girl, too, that she might eat her up. But Gretel knew that she was sneaky, and said, "I don't know how I'm to do it. How am I supposed to get in?" "Oh, you silly goose,"
said the hag. "The opening is big enough. See, I can do it myself."
And as she crawled toward it and poked her head into the oven, Gretel gave her a shove and sent her right in and shut the iron door behind her. Gracious, how the old lady yelled! It was quite horrible. But Gretel ran, and the wretched old woman was left to perish miserably. Gretel flew straight to Hansel, opened the big stable door, and cried, "Hansel, we're free! The old witch is dead!" Hansel sprang like a bird out of a cage when the door was opened. How they rejoiced and fell on each other's necks and jumped for joy and kissed one another. And as they no longer had any cause for fear, they went into the old hag's house, and here they found in every corner of the room boxes with pearls, precious gems. "These are even better than the pebbles," said Hansel, and he crammed his pockets full of them. Gretel said, "I too will bring something home," and she filled her apron full. "But now," said Hansel, "let's go. We'll see to find a way away from the witch's wood." And when they'd wandered for about some hours, they came to a big lake. "There is no way over this lake," said Hansel. "I see no bridge or anything." "Yes, there's no ferry boat either," answered Gretel. "But look, there swims a giant white duck. I'll ask her if she'll help us out." And she called out, "Here are two children, mournful very, seeking neither bridge nor ferry. Take us upon your white back and roll us over." Quack, quack. The duck swam toward them, and Hansel got on her back and bade his little sister sit behind him. "No," answered Gretel. "We should be too heavy a load for the duck. She shall carry us across separately." The good bird did this, and when they were landed safely on the other side, and had gone for a while, the wood became more and more familiar to them, and at length they saw their father's house in the distance. Then they set off to run, and bounding into the room, fell upon their father with a great big hug. The man had not passed a happy hour since he left them in the wood, but oddly enough, their stepmother had disappeared at the same time the old witch had died. Gretel shook out her apron so that the pearls and precious stones rolled about the room, and Hansel threw down one handful after another out of his pocket. Thus all their troubles were ended, and they lived quite happily ever after.